good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, our traditional second Wednesday of the month, and this is TimeSolv's Wednesday webinar. This is Scott Clayson. I'm the TimeSolv Director of Marketing, and I'm coming to you actually today from San Antonio, Texas, where we are down here at the Texas Family Law it's the Advanced Family Law Institute put on by the Texas State Bar. So we are here through the end of the day today, showing people all about TimeSolv. So I've stepped outside where our booth is to conduct this webinar for everybody. So want to give a couple extra minutes, let people roll in here, and please excuse any kind of background noise you might be hearing from me here as I'm at the hotel. And the internet as well has been pretty darn good most of the conference that we've been at, but does have some issues from time to time. So I have shared my screen. Everybody should be seeing the slide about Wednesday webinar, the tips and tricks to get the most out of TimeSolv. We're going to be covering several newer features of TimeSolv that have been released in just the last couple of weeks. So there's going to be several topics that we'll cover that won't take super long to get through. I anticipate we'll be able to get done in about probably no more than 45 minutes or so. So let me go ahead and share the various topics that we're going to discuss as we, again, remind everyone, this is the tip of the weeks that we send out on a weekly basis. You get to see them in action as we release things. Maybe these are things that has long been features in TimeSolv that you may not have been aware of. And we just want to make sure that you're get the most out of your subscription with TimeSolv as possible. So let's go ahead and take a look at where we're going to be going today. As you can see, we do have several topics to cover. Some of these have been in tip of the weeks. Some of them haven't. So at a high level, a couple of changes. These are new things that have been added to TimeSolv just in the last couple of weeks. We've added the ability to designate your task or expense codes as being billable, non-billable, or as no charge when the time and expense entries are made. We'll show you where you can do that. There was a reminder that some of our support people asked me to make sure we hit, and that is how you can go about changing the invoice settings at the firm level, which is essentially your default settings, how they can be changed at the client level, the matter level, and then down at the invoice level. You got to think of TimeSolv as a big, funnel. The firm level is the highest top of the funnel, where everything underneath it will fall under your defaults. But then you get a little bit more narrow into talking about just at the client level things you can change, then specifically for a individual matter for a client, and then even at the individual invoice level. So we'll review that a little bit today. And then a change that we pushed out, I want to say maybe about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, and that is the ability to create billing categories and, most importantly, generate draft invoices based on those billing categories. So you can, at the client or matter level, you can designate how you want to bill that particular client, whether maybe you only bill them on a quarterly basis or annual basis, but perhaps only 5 of your 100 clients that you have have set up a billing arrangement that way, and you don't want to have to remember which of those 5 you're supposed to bill quarterly or whatever it might be. So we'll run through how you can set the billing categories up, assign it to the matters at hand, and then use that when generating your draft invoices. Then we also just rolled out recently with the latest update, the ability to create custom field groups for matters. We do have some more robust ability to create custom fields and manage your clients in matters that fashion. We also just rolled out the ability, and this is not applicable to everybody. Obviously, if you don't do any leads billing, then this is not going to apply to you. But a lot of the billing portals will now allow you to upload one master file that can contain multiple invoices. So we'll show you how you can do that in TimeSolv. And then last but not least, we have, again, a new feature that was just released last week. And this comes to when you are allocating your payments. In the allocating payment screen, there was a little bit of confusion for some users because by default, we were displaying every invoice, every matter invoice for a client, and not just the one that you had made a payment for and wanted to allocate. So you can uncheck that box, and hopefully it'll lessen some of the confusion, and more importantly, the mistake of accidentally allocating a payment towards a matter that you didn't want to. So a lot to cover today. Let's get started with adding the task and expense codes and creating them as billable, non-billable, or no charge type entries. So as a reminder, when you're here in TimeSolv, I have this set up for my timekeepers where one of the options when I'm creating a time entry is an expense entry. You can do this as well, designating whether that's going to be a billable, non-billable, or no charge entry. This is not set up by default for every one of your timekeepers. Under the account and professionals area here, this is where you can turn that on. And I'm going to click on my admin person here, Scott Laidlaw. You could pick any one of your users. But under the permissions tab is where, for time entries, you would designate if you want to allow that timekeeper to be able to update the billable type. By default, this is turned off. I have turned this on for myself, obviously. If I were to turn that off and hit save, when I come back to my time entry screen, you'll notice I no longer have that billable type that I can choose from. A lot of firms don't want to give their timekeepers the ability to choose if a time entry is going to be billable, non-billable, or no charge. But we've had some firms ask and request, like, well, there are some things that we want to, across the board, we know we're not going to charge for, and we want our timekeepers to be able to designate the task at hand that's going to be not charged. So how do we do that? So we've now introduced the ability, if your timekeeper doesn't have permissions to change the billable type, but you want them to do a time entry that's non-billable or no charge, you can do this with the task codes. So you go under time to settings, and in our task codes tab here, for any one of the task codes, it doesn't matter whether it's the built-in ABA task codes or one that a custom-made task code that you created, you simply click on the code name itself here. So let's just say it's B190. Click on that. It's going to open up the window here where you can change the description, the narrative, and do lots of different things here. But most importantly, you can designate, is this going to be a task code of billable, non-billable, or no charge? This is where you would set that, so that now when I make a time entry as a professional and I choose that B190, okay, it's going to be a no charge. You know, it doesn't show that here, but on the invoice, it's going to be a no charge. And to help kind of accent how exactly that would look, let's go back and turn on my ability to create a no charge or non-billable time entry. Again, I apologize for the background noise here. We have some hospitality people that are. Looks like my Wi-Fi is slowing down a little bit here too. Going to go to permissions eventually. Again, for those that are joining late, I'm down in San Antonio at a conference, and Alpha on the side of the exhibit hall here. So I'm going to turn back on the update. Check that box, hit save. And it's going to save here for me in a minute. So now when I go back to my time entry screen, this is going to be perhaps a slow motion webinar today. And, you know, by default, the billable type is billable, but if I were to choose that task code B190, and it's going to then change that, we're going to choose B190, and here we go. Come on. That's the one. There we go. You notice change the billable type to no charge. So that was a painful way to show that I can now designate task codes, whether they're going to be billable, non-billable, or no charge. And this will allow your timekeepers who do not normally have the permissions to choose whether an entry is billable, non-billable, or no charge. By using task codes, that can now happen. All right. Okay. Our next tip that we want to show you is just quickly at a high level, making sure you're all aware of where you can change the invoice settings, both at the firm level. So this is the defaults that you'll use probably 90% of the time, let's say. If you need to modify them at the client level, at the matter level, and specifically at the invoice level, making sure you know how and where to do that. So this should be a kind of a quick run through, I think, for a lot of you. But at the firm level, to set the defaults, you know you're going to use the vast majority of the time. You go into your clients and settings. And the second tab over after general is the invoice settings. And to review all the various things that you can set here, first of all, if you do any milestone billing, and this goes like fixed fees and so on, and you want to designate it to automatically generate invoices and complete the milestone, when you give a date to a milestone, you can check this box and make sure that that happens. This is where you would choose the default billing template you're going to be using, again, the majority of the time. What's going to be the from address? As a firm, if you have multiple offices, you can set up those multiple office addresses and make sure that the invoice is coming from that specific office, but you want to have your main address probably as your default one. Do you apply interest? What's the rate going to be? Do you have a grace period before your interest will kick in? What are your payment terms? Here are your options here, making sure you have that in place. What's going to be the text and so on? What's your default delivery method of your invoices and the format? Your invoice narratives that appear on various parts of the invoice, like the cover page, the actual invoice page itself, the footers. If you do send your invoices via email, what's going to be in the body of the email? Same thing when you send an email, a statement email, you can put that in here as well. That's actually a new field that we've added, along with payment instructions and so on. These are the defaults. These are the ones you really want to pay attention to and take the majority of your time setting up correctly, because they're the ones you should be using the majority of the time. When you have the situations where you need to modify that based on unique circumstances, you can do that at the client level. And I would choose a particular client here. Let's say it's Amir is my client. I can come in here and there's a tab, Invoice Settings, and I can modify things here. Everything you just saw at the firm level, I can modify here at the client level. Okay, so now every new matter I create here for Amir will take on these settings. This is an important distinction when I said any new matter. If you make a change here and you already have some matters in place for this client, it's not, that change is not going to retroactively affect an existing matter. Just so everyone's aware of that. Okay, it would only affect any new matters moving forward if you make changes to this invoice settings at the client level and you already have matters in place. And then again, you can dive even further and say for a very specific matter for a client, if you do multiple matters for a client and you need to change the invoice settings for one specific matter, you'd simply click on it here. And again, you'll see this similar field. You go to your invoice settings, and this is where you can get more granular with the actual billing arrangement. How are you billing them for this matter? And here are all your various options. But again, here's the other settings here. You know, the billing template, the payment terms, the invoice delivery, the invoice narratives, and so on. Then you have one last chance to modify the invoice settings before you send out a bill, and that is actually at the draft invoice screen. So when you've actually generated an invoice, so you have one particular invoice, you may want to modify some settings for your client, Amir, your matter consultant. You click on the dollar amount here, and even here now you can change the billing template. You can change the address of where you want the invoice to be coming from. Okay, that's going to have this come over to that screen here. There we go. So we could change it and change the address to come from somewhere else if you'd like. This is your last chance to change the narratives. And again, if you change the narrative here, it's only going to change it for this specific invoice and nothing else ever again. But you could modify it here as needed, along with the other things you can modify on a draft invoice, like the time, expenses, and the totals. So again, just a refresher that this is where you can think of it from broadest to most granular. The broadest is being those firm settings that you're going to use the majority of the time. You can modify them then for a specific client, modify it for a specific matter within a client, and then you can modify them even at a specific invoice. All right, so it's from high list, if you will. Okay, let's talk about now billing categories, or sometimes they're called billing queues. And this is the idea of you may have a variety of billing arrangements in which you won't be generating an invoice for a client on a regular monthly basis. Perhaps you're going to bill them quarterly, perhaps you're going to bill them annually, perhaps it's contingent billing. But you want to do checks on things. So what do you in the past, if you had a client that you arranged, like I'm only going to send them an invoice every 3 months on a quarterly basis, you had to remember which of those clients you'd set that up for and just do that manually. And just know that, say it's the first week of April and you need to do the Q1 billing for that client, you had to remember which clients you had set up for that arrangement. Well, you don't need to do that anymore with our billing categories. Pretty excited about this one, actually. I know our internal staff was pretty excited about this. So to set up your billing categories you want to use, you go under your clients and settings. And then you have a tab over here called billing categories. And I've already created one already called monthly billing. So for those that are only going to always do monthly billing, you could have that category set up. You could create a new billing category here, and I'm going to call this quarterly billing. You can do a description on that if you'd like, so everyone knows exactly what that is. You could create another category that we'll call annual. If you only send invoices yearly, let's say, for a particular client or matter. I'm going to create another one called contingency, if you do contingency billing. I know some firms where a case might be or a matter might be going on for years, but they want their lawyers, they want the attorneys to do some periodic checking of the time entries to make sure things aren't completely going off the rails, or there's not a high-speed train of time entries. So you want to run a contingency bill periodically just to check things. So you could have a category called contingency. So you can create as many different categories as you'd like. There's no you can call it, you can label it whatever you'd like. You could call it billing queue, because I know that's a term some bigger firms use to describe these billing categories. But more importantly, when you go into your clients and matters, at the matter level, when you're looking at a matter and you go into the invoice settings, you have the option here now to specify the category, just categorizing it, saying this is going to be my annual and maybe monthly, whatever. You can give them multiple categories. But the point is then, once you've categorized the matter to a particular billing label, when you go to create your draft invoices, you'll see the option, creating a new draft invoice, to only create invoices for those that are been labeled or categorized as quarterly. Now you have to make sure the date range matches that, obviously, but now it's only going to create draft invoices for all of your clients that are specifically have quarterly billing for any of their matters, and it'll pull those. So now you don't have to remember which clients of mine am I going to bill quarterly. As long as you have the right billing category and you obviously choose the date range you need, it's going to pull all the time and expense entries for that date range for the clients that are labeled as quarterly billing. Really easy way now to not have to remember. And maybe it's monthly billing because it's fixed fee or whatever it could be. You could use it in that fashion as well, and whatever it's going to be. If you don't have any label on a particular client or matter, then it's just going to go back to your default on-demand arrangement that you would have that meets any date range. So you can use this in any fashion you need to. Okay. Let's talk about our next, again, we just released this just last week, custom field groups. So as a reminder, you do have the ability to create custom fields to house whatever different types of information you want to for your clients and matters. Under your clients and settings, you have a tab over here called custom fields. If you haven't noticed that yet, you can create custom fields that will display for your clients, for your contacts, for your matters, and now new, you can create matter groups. And when you come over here, you can say, I've already created one called child custody, for example. I could create a new custom field group. I just one called child custody, obviously. You can change the name, whatever it might be. But now for the matter, I can come over here, and now I see my default and the various fields that I've created, but I could create a new field for this category, this group called child custody. And I just click on new custom field. I choose the you know, whatever, again, you have all sorts of different types of custom fields you can create. And these are the list of them here. You name it. Let's just say we're going to do a date range. It's going to be a date range here. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, I'll just call it date range for now. You can do a default value and so on. But more importantly, I'm going to put it in the child custody group. And you can say it's a required field, whatever you might be. So now you have this, you know, grouping of custom fields by the category that I've created. Now when I go in and look at my clients and matters, I'm looking at a particular matter here. I go to my custom fields, and it'll show me, right, here's my default ones I'd set up, and it's just going to say default there. But I can choose the custom field group that I want to add to this particular matter. I'm going to assign that group to the matter. And now it's going to show those fields here, and I can add that data as need be. And, you know, again, this is just a great way to manage information that you need to manage for a matter in any way that you'd like to, because obviously it's a custom field. And then if I want to, I can unassign that group from the matter. I'm not sure why it's showing twice there, but you can see it goes away if you need it to go away. So again, flexibility, the ability to allow you to house as much or as little information as you need to. And this, it's important to understand that this grouping is only available at the matter level, not necessarily not at the client level or for contacts, but it's only specifically for matters. Okay, let's keep moving through here. The next thing I want to show you is we now have the ability to merge multiple lead invoices into one file. So for those of you that do leads billing, you know how tedious it is if you have, you know, dozens of lead invoices that you need to upload to the various portals, billing portals. Now, more and more of these billing portals are allowing you to upload one file for multiple invoices. And so TimeSolv has allowed you the ability to create that one file for multiple invoices. And it's very simple. You can do it one of two ways. You can either go to your invoice drafts screen, click on the select the invoices that you want to have appear all together on a leads file, click on download, choose whether you're going to do the 1998B or the international one, 1998BI version 2. Hit download, and it's going to download the file, and the invoices will all be on that one file for uploading to the system. You can also do the same thing. Some people like to go ahead and finalize the invoice and then create the leads file. You can certainly do that as well by going to your sent invoices screen, and maybe you do a sent invoice and you do it as a printed version so that you have a copy of the invoice for your files, and now you want to generate that leads file. So again, you would select the invoices that need to all appear on the same leads file, hit download, and then choose which leads format you'd like to use. We would recommend that, again, I wouldn't necessarily start with dozens and dozens of invoices all in one file, because if one gets rejected, trying to figure out which one got rejected can be problematic. As these portals do their scrubbing of the invoices files. So I would start slow, doing a couple at a time on one file, and then a couple more until you kind of get the feel on how the leads invoicing is going to be operating with the one file for multiple invoices. But the main point is you now have the ability to do that in TimeSolv, to create those multiple invoices on one leads file. Again, this came from a request from a firm that needed that and was tired of the tediousness of creating many leads files and having to upload them one at a time to these billing portals. So now we have the ability to just do one big file. All right, God, we're buzzing through this fast. Like I said, these are all a lot of little small changes that have come along here, but want to make sure you're all aware of them. So this last one here, the allocating payment screen and unchecking the include all matters for this client filter. I'm going to show you what that means exactly. We ran into our support people saying more and more what was happening when people were allocating payments was this. They'd go under the payment screen and they would record a payment to a specific client and matter. Okay, fair enough. Then it's time to allocate it. So in this case, I'm going to show you how the system essentially worked before this change came along. And by default, we had this more options that showed, when you clicked on more options, it would then show you that this box was checked to show all client and matters allocations here. Now you can see this without having to click more options. So I'm going to hit search here. I'm going to find I have a payment that I haven't allocated, and it's for the client Best Buy, and it's for the matter test. When you go to allocate that payment by clicking here, over here at allocate, currently it would have this box checked, include all matters for the client. So you can see remember, I'm just doing an allocation to the matter Best Buy, the matter test for my client Best Buy, but it was showing me every single matter and not just test. If I wanted to see invoices for just that matter, I had to uncheck this box. And as you can see, now it came through and shows me, okay, now it's just showing me these specific invoices for this specific matter. What was happening is people were essentially accidentally allocating to matters they didn't want to allocate payments to. So what we've changed is this. This is going to remain the same for those of you that are used to the system, but if you want to turn that off, that filter off, you go into your payments to settings, and you'll see now in the general tab, we have a third row here that asks you, do you want to show all invoices for a client while allocating payments? I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to hit save. I'm now going to go under my payments screen. Same thing, I'm going to just show all my allocatable. Here's my client, Best Buy, my matter test. I go to allocate this $2,000. And now you'll notice this is unchecked, and it's going to be showing me only the matters invoice, the one matters invoices, all 5 of them here. Then I can allocate as needed. So hopefully this is a change that will allow you to not accidentally allocate a payment to a matter that you don't want to allocate a payment to. Okay, that's actually everything that we wanted to get through today. I'd like to ask, does anybody have any questions at this point? There should be a Q&A icon that you can click and ask questions. This is the time to do it. I know we kind of went through a lot of kind of smallish things within TimeSolv that didn't need a ton of elaboration. Hopefully everyone, it makes sense for everybody. The various things that I showed you, we're really excited about that billing category and the ability to generate draft invoices based on the category that you designate. So it looks like we have Robert raised your hand. If you have a question, Robert, go ahead and type it in the Q&A section of the, you should see a Q&A icon down there right where you did the hand raising. And you should be able to ask the question that you may have. There's also, I believe, oh, this doesn't have chat here on this particular webinar software. It has the Q&A. So Robert, if you have a question, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A area here. Ah, here we go. Yes, Robert did type it. Can you show us how to allocate billing category once set up to a particular client or matter? Yeah, I'd have to put in time and expend some time entries for that, which, so if you, let me create a whole new client and matter and see if we can quickly, so we're going to call this, I'll call this the Texas webinar since I'm down in San Antonio right now. And as a Minnesota guy down in Texas in August, I feel like I've been living on the sun the last 3 days. It's been over 100 degrees every day down here, and I'm not used to that. Okay, so I have my client Texas webinar. You can, again, specify the billing category right here at the client level, and I'm going to say it's quarterly billing, let's say. Then I'm going to create a matter. Let me make sure I save this. So now I've designated him in the category, or this client in the category of quarterly billing. So now I have a matter here. I'm going to create a new matter. And we're going to call it Texas webinar matter. And now it's already going to take on its parent or client attributes. So it should already have the fact that it's, yeah, quarterly billing here. It does. So now I can go in and say, make some time entries. And let's pretend like, you know, we're into Q3, but let's say we're doing Q2. So I'm going to go back and I can do some time entries, you know, in May for this particular client and matter. So I'm going to put in, you know, 2.5, do a description, save and duplicate to June. We'll just do like 2 right now, just so we have some time built in. So now let's say it was the, you know, it's the first week in July, you want to do your Q2, you know, billing. Now, once you got through June, so I would go under invoices to drafts. I would create new draft invoice. And actually, let me delete out these older, hang on before I do that. I'm going to just void all these various older drafts just to get them out of the way. So I'm going to create a new draft invoice. And I want to say, hey, I just want to give me everybody that's quarterly. So I didn't have to specifically grab the Texas webinar one. I want to do a date range that's going to be, you know, Q2, which is going to be April 1st through, you know, June 30th, right? Okay, and I want to hit create. And it should be generating the one invoice that met that, you know, criteria here. See, one draft invoice created successfully. And there it is, Texas webinar. So I didn't have to choose, you know, the whole point is I didn't have to choose this client and matter. It met the criteria that I had it in that category of quarterly billing. And then of course I had to make sure that I grabbed the right time period, because it's just grabbing like it would like any on-demand time and, you know, expense type of thing. It's going to grab all the time entries that meet that date criteria. But I didn't have to know that Texas webinar and Texas webinar matter was the on quarterly billing. I just choose the category. I didn't have to remember that. So hopefully that helps answer that question. You see that you were saying billing categories does not show up in the client level screen. Yes, it's not going to show up until you actually create the billing categories. Until you create the billing categories, they won't show up. You won't see it on your screen. So make sure you come in first to under clients and settings and create a couple of billing categories. Then you're going to see it under the clients and matters. That was something I just did actually yesterday as I was preparing for this because I hadn't done it yet. So you first have to set up, otherwise, and you also won't see it as well on the draft invoice screen either until you've actually created those billing categories. This row here, billing category, is not going to appear for you. Okay, so that's important to understand that you won't see it until you actually create some categories. It's hidden essentially until then. Okay, so that answers those two questions. Hopefully that helped you out there. And you understand how you can use those billing categories. Okay, any other questions at this point? About anything that we've showed you here today? I'll give you another minute or so to raise your hand. Let me know if something doesn't make sense. And by the way, we are starting to roll out slowly but surely. This is kind of the ability to, it's a plugin that you can use if you use Microsoft Outlook or Office 365 that will allow you to make time entries right from your email screen. So as you're typing an email, you could associate that and make a time entry out of it for the time it took you for the work that you were doing on that. So I'll be showing that in a future webinar. We've kind of done a soft launch on it and making sure that any bugs that we have associated with that are worked out. But we're excited about having this newer integration coming out with Office 365 and making sure that the time entry, the ability to create time entries from your email client works smoothly. I know that the next phase that we want to have come out is the ability to have any calendar events that are on your Outlook calendar. You can determine if you want to automatically have those calendar events create a time entry for a specific client and matter. So you have that 1 hour block of time booked out for a client meeting. When you make that event on your calendar, you could say, yes, automatically make this event a time entry for this specific client and matter that's in TimeSolv, and then it would appear over there, which will be great. It'd be a fantastic thing. We're looking forward to that. So, okay, well, that's all I have then for today. I haven't seen any other questions roll in. I appreciate everyone joining me. I appreciate your patience. As I've been, as I'm here in Texas, and I know it was hopefully the sound was good and the Wi-Fi seemed to work as well as possible and there wasn't too much background noise. As always, we'll record this. I'll send out a recording so you can review this at your leisure. But otherwise, everyone, you have a great rest of the day, great rest of August, and keep looking for the information about new things that we're releasing with TimeSolv. And we will see you. Let's see, we will be doing our next webinar. Let's take a look in September, second week in September. It's going to be September 11th. Which we'll all remember that date, right? So September 11th, we will be doing our next Wednesday webinar, and we hope to see you then. So everybody have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you later.